Hi, Bobby. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I was looking through your website. My goodness, you have a lot of books there, but you're also a publisher, I understand.
Yes, well, mostly I publish me, just I don't, up until recently, I have not published anyone that wasn't me.
Okay.
Last year, I have a series called Snow, which I write, which is an action thriller series. And last year, I invited some author friends of mine to do some short stories with the characters that we released individually, but then we collected into like an anthology volume. So that was a first for me, having other people, play in my sandbox and be part of my publishing company.
Okay.
It was it was fun and terrifying.
Tell us a little
Yeah.
bit about how you all started writing and where did it all begin?
Well, when I was a kid, my grand goal, my career goal was to be a comic book artist. I loved comics. I thought, being able to create comics for a living would just be the coolest thing in the world. Turns out I'm not quite that good an artist. But I was writing stories so I would have things to draw. And people were noticing the stories. And so other artists were asking me to write for them. And that's kind of where the bug kind of hit me. And then I had a friend that suggested that, if I focused on either the writing or the drawing, I would probably be better because I was splitting my focus. And I guess he said it on the right day because I took it to heart and started focusing on the writing. And just a couple of years later, sold my first professional story. So
Interesting.
so yeah, so comics were the first love, and I wrote comics. I still write comics, but I wrote comics exclusively for a few years. And during that time, I was like, I'm going to write a novel just
Mhm.
to see if I can do it.
Yeah.
And I did, and it was horrible. It sucked. It was terrible. Oh, it was awful. But I finished it, and so that kind of enticed me to try it again. And so I wrote another one, and it turned out to be the one I sold. It was a book called Evil Ways. It came out in 2005, and it got the ball rolling on me getting other work. Because from Evil Ways, I got to do some short stories for some publishers while I was working on the next novel. So everything kind of steamrolled after that. And so it's been pretty steady work since 2005.
Do you have a job besides writing?
Not now. I mean, I did for many years. I got laid off from the job I was at in 2016, near the end of 2016. And at that time, it just coincided. Both my parents had health issues and needed someone to drive them and help them. So I kind of I was doing that while I burned through my savings. And after things kind of settled down a bit, I was like, well, you know what? If I was ever going to, I'm still taking care of them, but I've got some time. If I'm ever going to make a full time go of this, let me see what I can do now. So I've been doing it full time since then. and
Interesting.
and and splitting my time also with my dad. My mom is no longer with us, but my dad is. So,
Okay.
but yeah, so this is my full time gig at the moment.
Good. How did the pandemic affect all your work?
Oddly enough, the pandemic was a bit of a blessing in disguise in terms of work because all of a sudden I wasn't doing two or three conventions or book events or I was gone somewhere almost at least three out of the 3 weekends a month. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then at, having to rest and recuperate a day or two after events. So suddenly having those go away for almost 2 years, I got a lot done while I was home every day. I got caught up on deadlines, actually pulled ahead, got some projects going that I wasn't sure I was going to have time to do. So that was nice. So it allowed me to get a lot of work done, kind of get things a little less chaotic, a lot less frantic. You know, it's amazing how stress decreases when you're ahead of deadlines.
Yeah, sure. Of course.
So yeah. And then other than that, my dad and I started taking we would take drives during the pandemic. We would just get in the car and go. No real destination, just we'll go see what we can see, make a day of it. And so that kind of kept us sane. And then, but it also became bits of research because we would be driving along, and I read a lot of crime fiction. So we would be driving along, and I'd be taking photos with my phone and telling my dad, "Look, we could find a body over there. You know, it's a great place to hide a body, or that, you know." So it kind of became a little bit. Our trips became a little bit of research as I was going. Ooh, I could put this scene there, or you know, I've been thinking of having a scene that happens in a place similar to this, so I could get out and kind of walk around, take some photos, and just kind of research it, the area. So when I go to write that area, I remember what it was like to be there, and that kind of helped a bit. So yeah, so yeah, I didn't enjoy the pandemic, but the pandemic was fruitful on the writing side by being at home all the time.
Do you have a specific genre that you excel at?
I do a lot of action and a lot of thriller elements to everything I do. I do not agree with the stay in your lane thing. I write what I like to write. The stuff that I do on my own, where I created it and started, a lot of that is very much crime fiction. You know, the Snow books or the Sheriff Myers books or Evil Ways or those. There's a there's a there's a crime and an element of fear and thriller and danger to those, but also like to shoot people and car chases and that kind of stuff. So those elements are in everything I write. But I have publishers coming to me going, "Hey, we need a horror western." Okay, I can do that. Or we have this superhero character, or I need a horror story, or I need a sci-fi story, or you know, just recently, hey, would you like to write Zorro? You know, those type of things. You know, would you like to write Kolchak the Night Stalker? And the answer to those is always yes, yes, I would.
Yeah.
So I'm able to do multiple genres, and I don't think it has hurt anything.
Yeah.
Now there are people that, you know, what you hope is the people that read your Kolchak story will go, "Man, this guy's good. Let me go check it." And that doesn't always happen. You know, sci-fi readers don't always, you know, read crime. Some do. I mean, some of the best sales I've ever had in person selling my crime fiction was at a science fiction convention, a Doctor Who convention, because you know there was something there they enjoyed reading. Because readers don't do that. Most readers don't just go, "I read only this." They read what they like.
Well,
And it can, and just like with TV and movies, we don't all just watch one thing.
well, I talked to you earlier and said I don't think I'll have enough RAM or hard drive space to cover everything you've written. Let's pick a book.
Okay. Well, let's start with the Snow series, I guess. That one's one that's currently running. I'm currently writing book 7 now, and they're novellas. It's a novella series, so I try to put out a couple a year. They're about 30,000 words, like an old 70s size paperback. So I do those, and those are action thrillers. Snow is a former undercover operative who, and this isn't much of a spoiler because it's the first 2 pages of the first book. His cover gets blown, he gets shot and left for dead. Obviously, he doesn't die because then it would be a whole different genre. But he's no good in that job anymore, so he is forced into retirement. But he continues to like help and take on things, and he's still trying to find the person who blew his cover and catch the guy that shot him and that kind of thing. And so it's very much I tell people it's very much my love letter to the cop and PI shows and books I grew up reading and watching. You know, there's going to be a lot of Rockford in there, or a lot of Magnum, that kind of stuff. That feel, and yeah, where it's, you know, the characters getting into situations and having to get themselves out of it.
Yeah.
And yeah, so far there are um, 6 novellas, and we also collect them. Every 3 gets collected into a novel size collection, and then there are 3 novellas worth of the short stories I mentioned that other writers are doing. They're called Snow Shorts, they're very action oriented, very character driven. Sometimes more so the character stuff is more important sometimes than the plot. But it's really all about, Snow and his friends as he's trying to reintroduce himself into this life he left after he graduated from high school, because he's been gone for like 12 years. And so he's having to reintroduce himself to this and meet up with old friends and family and find a way to find a way to enter a life that is not tied up with either government or military work, which is all he's known, or pretending to be somebody else. So that's a lot of fun. So I'm having a blast with those, and they're, like I said, they're very action oriented. I blow stuff up, car chases, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Good, clean fun.
Yeah, of course. And I take it takes place in the United States.
Most of it. I mean, some of it, some of the undercover stuff is elsewhere.
Okay.
But like it opens in South America.
Okay.
And I just recently, and in addition to those, just recently I did an audio drama short for On Another Wavelength. They were doing a season called Prequels, and so they were doing full cast audio dramas, prequels to people's book series. And so there's one called Snow Ride, which is the 10 minutes leading up to the beginning of the first book, Snowfalls. So it ends with him getting shot, whereas the book begins with him getting shot. So that was fun. And cool. And it's really cool hearing actors play these characters too, and seeing how they interpret it. Or like when Stuart Goffey, who does the audiobooks, hearing how he interprets, their mannerisms.
Okay.
It's really cool to hear all that stuff.
I was on your website just before you came on. I didn't get a chance to hit the audio, Bobby's audio or something. What is that about? Is that what we're talking about? The audio?
Yeah. Well, we have audios for a lot of the books. There are some production, some just we haven't got there yet. But yeah, I have audio narrators that come in and perform the book. Wow. That will read it and give the characters a little, they're not just reading it, they're kind of performing the character bits. Sure. And we have those for several books. But then the prequel to Snowfalls is just an audio book. It's just it's like a 10-minute audio, full cast audio. And I've done a couple of those for On Another Wavelength.
You yourself, like your own voice?
Yeah. Well, no. They hire actors. Okay. Yeah. No, nobody wants to hear me. And I tried it once. I tried reading one of my stories once, and I just don't think I'm that good at it. So I much rather leave it to people that know what they're doing.
Yeah. When I used to commute, I listened to audiobooks. There's good ones, and then the bad ones is like, I don't want. Okay, I'm sure it's a good story, but the voice is not working for me.
Yeah, it's when the audition process is, because you go through a lot of, like, I would go through a lot of people and listen, and this one works, this one doesn't, and some that were good, they just weren't right. It's not the voice I'm hearing, or it's not the tone I want. And there's all kind of things you think of when you go in to do these things. When you're doing audio, when someone's doing an audio of your book, okay, do you want a man or a woman? Do you want an accent?
That's the other thing too. I mean, my books have both men and women in it, and I wouldn't know what to do about that.
Yeah, well, the way I approached it, the books, whoever the main character is, that I'm looking for a narrator that's going to get the main character. And so, like, on books I have where the main character is a man, I usually look for a male narrator. On books where the main character is a female, I usually look for a woman to do the audio. And they all kind of give them their own little voice. I mean, they give a little spin to the voices anyway. Not parody, but just enough difference that it's that person talking. Like Stuart with the Snow books, all of the characters, when he's doing dialogue, all of those characters have they're not Stuart talking like Stewart does when he's narrating the action parts.
Yeah.
He gives them all a little personality.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see
but
that.
he does it in a way, like I said, it doesn't sound like parody. It's, he's not like trying to, it's like, oh, I'm going to do the female voice. Like, no, he's not trying to do that. He's just giving them a just a little different, so that when you hear them talking, you know who it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and the narrators that are really good at that are really good at that. So, yeah.
I talk to many authors on my show, and one of the mysteries that when I do talk about audiobooks, I don't talk to every author about audiobooks, but whenever I take it there, they all wish they could do it. Yeah, I really want to do that. I'm not sure how to go about doing that.
There are multiple ways to do it. You can, and ACX, which is Audible, you can do them through there. There's also other places that do them. We also do some through a company called Spoken Realm. There's multiple ways you can do it. You put out you put out a sample chapter to ask for auditions, and the narrators who are interested will audition. They'll read that chapter or that whatever. It doesn't have to be a whole chapter. It could just be a couple pages, and you just tell them up front, I can pay you X amount, or I can pay you X amount and then royalties, or I can't really afford to pay you. Are you willing to work for just royalties? And then you split the profits, however you split them. So there are different ways of doing that. But let them know up front. Don't spring it on them. Oh, I want you to do this. Great. I'm not going to pay you anything. Let them know up front that I don't have a lot of money. Here's what I can afford. And if they're willing to do it for that, and then as you sell the books, the audios, then the profit money will get split as well. So it just depends on, because some people that are earlier in their audio narrating career might be more willing to do it just for the profit split, just to get some books out. So you can approach it that way.
Okay.
Just be honest with people. Here's what I can afford to spend. Well, and then people that can't work for that won't audition. And so that allows you to audition people that are willing to work in your budget. And so like everything else, I mean, you can spend thousands of dollars doing this, or you can spend hundreds.
Okay.
So having that plan in place, I think, not only helps you avoid headaches and heartache, because I'd hate to get my heart set on a narrator and then they go, I can't work for that. So it allows you to avoid some of those, but it also gives you there's an air of professionalism there, because you've put this plan in place, which they will look at that too. It's like, oh, this is not just somebody going, I want an audiobook. This is somebody that's like, I know what I want and here's what I can do. You've put some thought into it. So that will help you, I think, in the long run as well.
Yeah. You want to talk about Evil Ways?
Sure. Evil Ways was my first published novel. It was the second one I wrote. The first one was, but Evil Ways was the first one I sold. It was my first stab at crime fiction, but there's also a very, very suspense thrillery feel to it. I often, this is my sales pitch when I'm at conventions or events. Imagine if John McClane from Die Hard found himself in a slasher movie, and that's the guy in Evil Ways.
Okay.
So it's this action oriented guy who suddenly finds himself in the middle of a murder mystery, and this person is stalking and killing people, and they're trying to find out why. But there's also the mystery to it. I don't tell you who the killer is. I tell you, I mean, you see the killer do things, but I just say the killer, you don't, as the audience, I let you try to figure it out along with the main characters. And I've gotten a lot of feedback over the years. It's like, wait, I thought it was, this person, or, how did that, so there's a lot of that. So, and I love that. I love putting in the red herrings.
A lot of twists.
Twists and turns, and who you thought was the baddie might not be the baddie, or who you thought was
Yeah.
this might, so, but then you have to make all that make sense too. Um, writing the hardest part, writing clues, and you've probably run into this as well, because it's a clue. When you're writing it, it's like there's a giant neon sign pointing to it going, this is a clue. Whereas the audience, because they don't have that foreknowledge, don't always catch that clue. And so I felt really good about the fact that some of those clues didn't immediately tell people in chapter 3, oh, I know who it is. So that made me feel good. And so I love writing things like that with the mystery and the misdirect and
Mhm.
the characters setting things up, and um, trusting the characters, because a lot of times the characters will tell you what they will do and won't do,
Yeah.
and sometimes with these you get a twist, not because I planned it, but because as I'm writing it, the character does something that makes the light bulb go off over my head and go, wait a minute, that's a good thing. And then it's like, oh, let me go back and plant the seeds so all that makes sense. And then most of the time you're surprised those seeds are already there, that subconsciously, through the characters, I was laying the groundwork for that without consciously planning to do it. And so, yeah, and those type of things can be fun because you don't, things happen, you're not always planning that. And like with Evil Ways, Evil Ways is a great story. I love it. It's a lot of fun. And a lot of stuff happened there that all these years later, I'm still picking up threads on. Like the Sheriff Myers series that I do now. Sheriff Myers is a third tier character in Evil Ways. That's where he first shows up. He was never intended to have his own series, but the character grabbed me and just would not let go. I like to tell people that over the years, there'd be this little knock on the back of my brain, and he would be going, I'm still here, And it just took a number of years for me to find the right story for him.
Yeah.
And so when it did, he ends up now not only just one book, he gets his own series. So things like that are pretty cool. But Evil Ways was great. Evil Ways, um, the publishing experience was not good. The publisher that picked it up did not. They were not good. I did not have a lot of good experience with them. Uh, there was just a lot of nonsense. It happens. But I did have a book in my hand, and having that book in my hand led me to show it to, because like I said, because I was already doing comics, so I was doing conventions, I was doing events, I was meeting editors, meeting publishers. It allowed me to put a book in their hand. And in this, especially back then in the not before you do it yourself days, the you know it's that catch 22. Nobody wants to be the person that hires you first. And so, like, you go up, talk to an editor or a publisher and say, hi, I'm Bobby, I'm a writer. And they're like, oh, well, what have you written? And they're like, well, I'm working on my first novel. And you can almost see the glaze go over their eyes because you've lost them. But if you say, hi, well, what have you written? And you put a book in their hand, you put a book in someone's hand, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to look at the cover. They're going to
Mhm.
flip it over. They're going to read the back. They're going to flip through a few pages. You've bought yourself a minute or
That's true.
two.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that helps. The fact that someone else hired you, that and a book came out, that's important. Also, to publishers and editors, you finished a novel. That's important, because for every one person out there that finishes a novel, there's probably hundreds who started one and never finished it.
Sure.
So they like, so editors like looking at that and going, "Ooh, okay, we know this. We know this guy will finish what he starts."
Sure.
And so that helps. And so Evil Ways, in addition to being just my first published novel, it opened the door to other work at other publishers, because I got work from like 4 different publishers because they saw Evil Ways.
That's a
Um,
very good point.
yeah. And then when my contract ran out with the crappy publisher, I then shopped it around again to another other publishers and just never had any luck. So that was the first thing that I self-published, because by then doing, the print on demand was a little more accepted.
Yeah.
And so I released it just to keep it out there. I had no intentions of being a publisher, but I put that out just to keep it out. And then when I wrote Deadly Games, which is not a sequel to Evil Ways, but it happens in the same town, and Sheriff Myers is in it as well, it became, well, they're in the same universe, I should just do that myself as well. So the books are not at different publishers. And that's where the kind of the ball started rolling of, oh, well, anything that happens in that universe, I'll just do myself. Evil Ways opened a lot of avenues for me that I hadn't intended to run down. So yeah,
you get good food for thought.
yeah,
And I have
it's
to
one of those
say,
weird things too. And because there are times when I go, I kind of wish I hadn't had to deal with that crappy experience with the publisher. What would have happened had I said no, had I known up front. But then, despite all that, if I hadn't had that book, would those other opportunities have opened for me? So it's one of those weird,
no,
what is it? Lemonade from lemons?
yeah, something like that. Yeah. As long as you add sugar, I mean, so let me get this straight. Would this work for somebody like you published through a publisher, Evil Ways?
Mm-hmm.
Was that apparent? Was that obvious by holding a book and seeing that you didn't self-publish this, that it was actually published by another publisher? Does that help?
Well, I don't know how obvious it was, but it had that publisher's logo on it and that kind of stuff. And also when that came out, there weren't a lot of people their self-publishing was not as prevalent. So if you were self-publishing back then, the prevailing wisdom was that you're just not good enough to get a publisher.
Okay.
And people kind of look down on it.
Do you
So
think it's the same way now?
no, not at all. I think it has become, the do-it-yourself model is much more widely accepted today. That
That's good
it's
to
not,
know.
and not just in publishing, in music, movies, people doing their own YouTube shows, people doing podcasts.
This is the end of part 1 of my conversation with Bobby Nash. If you want to see part 2, it's right over here.